All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Household Journeys. So, on this episode, what I wanted to show you guys was how I made a custom dumbbell rack. So, just to give you guys a little bit of a backstory here, what ended up happening was a while ago, I bought myself a set of powerblocks. Now, if you know what powerblocks are, they are adjustable dumbbells. If you don't know what they are, here's what they look like. Okay, so you get a set of these right here. And as you can see on the front here, they're adjustable. And the set that I have goes all the way up to 90 pounds. And so the way it goes is that you have a handle right here in the center. So your hand sits right inside. And you have this little pin here that as you move the pin downwards, you end up adding more weight. So they're adjustable dumbbells. But the issue that I had with these is that for the longest time, they're just sitting on the floor. I didn't really have a place to put them. And the rack that was sold for powerblocks, if I remember correctly, they're like somewhere around definitely over $100. I think somewhere over $150. So that was too expensive for me because all it is just a plate with legs. So I found that was really expensive, overpriced in my opinion. But the other thing too is that the wife, she has some handful of dumbbells. So I wanted to utilize that space and just kind of incorporate it all into one with a few dumbbell or with a few kettlebells to throw into that as well. So I went to Home Depot and bought myself 2 boards. They were each 2x10s. And I think at the time of this video, I made them in January 2024. The price of those 2 boards ended up being somewhere around $35. So $35 compared to buying a rack for the power blocks and then having to buy another rack for the hexagonal dumbbells would have been somewhere well over $200. So with that being said, I'm going to show you guys how I made this thing. So let's hit that title card and let's go. So first thing that I did was because the wood isn't in the best shape here, I ended up running them through my planer, and I also tried to square off the edges best I could. I don't have a joiner. So then I ended up grabbing the widest plate because each plate goes up in increments of 10. The plate I have right here is for 90 pounds. So that's when you have all the weights added together. It's the widest one. So I used that to measure out how wide I wanted to start making the rack here. And then what I ended up doing is that I ended up cutting these small little slits on the table saw. So that way I can put a little bit of a lip around the base for the power blocks. That way I don't have to worry about the power blocks ever sliding off or anything like that because the lips will hold them in place. But but the thing is that with the power blocks, there's a pin on that goes on either side. So I didn't want the lip to get in the way of that. And I went back and I cut the pieces, the little lips, so that way I can have a gap right on the center of the left side and the right side of my base there. Once that was done, I just went around and I used my brad nailer to nail the lips around the base. I didn't use wood glue for any of this project simply because I didn't want to wait around for glue to dry. If you do want to do this, you know, the wood glue will make this a lot stronger. And once I had the lips in place, I just went around and gave it a little bit of a sanding to smoothen out some of the corners and round off some of the corners. Once I finished that, I went around and I started cutting out the frame, the rest of the pieces for the power blocks. Gave those a sanding, and then I started clamping and screwing everything together. So here you can see how the frame looks, and I'm testing it out. There is a little bit of wobble during this process, but the pin slides out really easy. I'm able to lift the power blocks without any kind of obstruction whatsoever. And I could also put the kettlebells on the inside frame, which helps maximize the space for this thing. So once I had that, I went ahead, did the second one, clamped it together, screwed everything in place, sanded it. And then at this point, I started to, I was going to make the rack for the dumbbells. There's 3 pairs of dumbbells, the 10s, 20s, and 30s. I just traced them out and I staggered each one a little bit further, leaving approximately a 1-inch gap between each set of dumbbells. And then once I had them traced out, I used my speed square to kind of perfect the measurements a little bit and make sure that everything was evenly spaced out. So once I had everything drawn up, I went ahead and cut everything out using my my jigsaw there. And then once it was cut out, there were a lot of harsh edges, so I went around and sanded that as well. I tried to sand it best I could. And then you can see here how I'm just testing out, make sure everything fits. The everything was a little bit snug. If I were to do this again, I would probably make the cutouts a little bit bigger, but it still works. It still functions pretty well. And then here, I have everything lined up, so I'm just making sure everything works well and I can put it all up against the frame. But what ended up happening is that I didn't cut these out perfectly squared, and you can see that on my speed square. I do have, it is off by a little bit. So I had to go take the brackets there to my table saw to go ahead and square those up. So now you can see that they're actually pretty squared. And I did that to all 4 pieces. Once I had all 4 pieces done, there was a lot of unevenness between the 4 brackets. Now, if I had a CNC, this would have been a lot easier and it just would have replicated all the dimensions exactly. But since I'm doing this freehand, there was a lot of deviation between the parts. Once I had all the, I guess you could say all the dimensions, all the measurements as close as possible, then I tried to figure out how I wanted to space everything out. What I wanted to do was I wanted to put a little bit of a gap between the 2 frames. And I'll show you guys why I did that a little bit later on. And then I screwed the brackets into the frames, and the base, I screwed the base on last. And this is what held everything together. And whatever wobbliness there might have been, this is where all of that got taken care of. So everything is pretty flush, and there really is no wobble anymore at this point. Again, I did not use any wood glue during this process, so everything is just being held together with wood screws. Once I had all the wood screwed together, I went ahead and put some caster wheels on there. Now, each of these caster wheels, I believe, was rated at 100, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say that each one was rated at around 150 pounds. So 4 wheels, 600 pounds of capacity there, which is plenty for the amount of weight that I have for my dumbbells. Once I had everything cut out, I ended up using about a board and a half of material. Something I forgot to mention earlier was that the boards, there are 2x10s, so 2 inches thick, 10 inches wide, and they're 10-foot boards. I used about 15 feet worth of wood to make the entire dumbbell rack. Now, I didn't want the rack to move too easily because my garage does have a slight slant. There is a little bit of a slope there. So I don't want the dumbbell rack just kind of rolling on its own one day and going out into the driveway, hitting one of the cars or anything like that. Afterwards, I spray painted the entire thing with 2 coats of silver spray paint or aluminum spray paint, whatever. And I did that because the squat rack that I have, that I built in my garage, I painted it silver, so now everything matches. And it gives it kind of a, that steel kind of look, which I like. I think it looks cool. Now, the other thing about these power blocks, if you're not familiar with them, is that on top of being able to go up in weight, it goes up every 10 pounds. They come with these little adder weights. So what I mean by that is on the inside of the handle, they have these little 2.5 pound weights. So you can go up 2.5 pounds. There's 2 of them, or you could do 5 pounds. So that way you can do, because of these little things, I had to figure out where to store them when they're not in use. So the solution to this was that I took 1.5 inch PVC pipe, and the little adder weights are small enough to where they fit inside of that piece of PVC. So I cut 4 of them because each power rack, each power block has 2 adder weights. And then I cut them to a size a little bit smaller than the adder weight, so that way I can grab them and take them in and out. Now, what I did was, so what I ended up doing with the pieces of PVC is that at the bottom, I drilled a screw going through the PVC, and that would eventually screw into the back of the dumbbell rack. By doing this, the screw basically becomes the floor, if you will, of the PVC pipe. So that way, when I put the adder weight inside, it'll sit on the screw and won't fall out through the bottom. And then what I also did is that I drilled a hole at the top, so that way when I screwed the PVC pipes in there, the screw at the top would sit flush with the inside of the PVC pipe, so that way the adder weights can go in freely without hitting the screw. And by cutting out that, or drilling out that hole, my bit holder can actually fit inside of the PVC pipe. Also, the casters, they do have brakes on them, which is a little extra feature, so that way if you don't want them moving around or anything like that, it's an extra bit of safety there. So pretty sturdy. So here it looks once I start adding all my weights into the dumbbell rack. Now, if you see that I put a little bit of a gap in between the 2 frames, I did that so that way if I ever have, if I need to pick up something heavier, say I can step in between the dumbbells to lift them up for a little bit more leverage. Now, last thing I want to mention here is, because I did make this out of wood, I did have a few issues. And the issues mainly came from the bracket that holds the hexagonal dumbbells. Now, what happened there is that those little bits that kind of hang out, those little lips that hold the hexagonal dumbbells there, they broke off. And in order to reattach them, what I did is that I used my brad nailer, and I used 2-inch nails, and I nailed them back into place. So now with the 2-inch nails, they're reinforced and won't break off again. Another thing that I ended up doing was that if you can kind of see the wood grain here, the wood grain is vertical. So another thing that ended up happening it was that the wood would split along the vertical grain. So what I did to keep the wood from splitting was that I used 2-inch wood screws to right there underneath the lip of the dumbbell holders, so that way the wood wouldn't split apart. The screw would actually keep the grain all together. All right, so there you go. There's my custom dumbbell rack. As you can see, very versatile with all the different types of weights that I have in there. I really enjoy having this thing in the garage now because it makes it so much easier for me to be able to switch from doing a workout to doing my woodworking. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care.